I ranked all 310 Pokemon abilities from worst to best. Yeah, I actually did it, buds. Every Pokemon has an ability. Some are good, great, excellent even, and some underwhelming, bad, and even negative. So let's rank them all competitively today in this long video, based on their current or most recent effects, of course. First of all, we have to lay some ground rules, as this list is incredibly hard to make, so please don't comment without listening to the ranking criteria. I'm going to do these rankings based on how good they are in competitive situations, with singles and doubles formats considered. In practice, on the average mon that would have access, how beneficial is this ability to have? Doubles only abilities will be included, although having no effect in singles hurts. I won't dock them too much for that if they're exceptionally good in doubles. This will definitely be hard to implement properly. Keep in mind I am more of a singles player, so my bias and knowledge will be more from those formats. Signature abilities will be weighed more by the mons that get access, since they are our only reference point. But just because a Pokemon with a signature ability is good or bad, it doesn't mean their ability will automatically be placed higher or lower. This is part 1 of a 3-part series. I'm going to break it down for you to make it more digestible and not have to edit like 3 hours of content in one go. So we're going to cover about 100 abilities per video. I also need your comments to let me know where I placed abilities too high or too low, as I plan to release these together as a whole video after I'm done, but we'll rearrange the order depending on feedback. And last but not least, before we get to the first ability, I will be including form changing abilities too, based on how helpful or detrimental the ability is in a competitive setting. This is another difficult one to rank because many are a matter of perspective. I don't want to spend too much time intro-wise for such a big video, so grab some grub, slide under the covers with the homies, and let's just get into it, buds. For our bottom tier of abilities, these will be negative or detrimental to have. It would pretty much always be better to just have no ability in these situations, and they hamper the users by having them. In the bottom spot, 310, some may think I'd placed abilities that have no competitive use, but nah, those are better than a few abilities with strictly negative effects. Here I have Regigigas' signaturely bad slow start, having attack and speed for 5 turns when the user is switched in, and resetting upon switch out. Terrible, and I'd say the worst ability in the game. Spot 309, we get another obvious one out of the way in Truant. Essentially slacking signature ability, unless you want to try the gimmick Durant entrainment set. It only allows you to act every other turn, a true detrimental ability that is way worse than having no ability at all. In spot 308, we'll see Defeatist. Not quite as bad as the previous two, as its negative effects aren't immediately active. This ability halves a user's attack and special attack stats when at 50% health or lower. It can be played around a little bit better, and you can heal out of Defeatist range, so it avoids being bottom 2. In spot 307, another crap ability appears. We have Stall. This is Sableye's signature ability, and really has no effective competitive uses on Sableye. It forces the user to move last in its priority bracket, regardless of speed or Trick Room being active. This is a terrible ability, don't get me wrong, just a little less bad than the previous 3. Now that we are done with the truly horrible abilities, we will move on to the mostly bad abilities. And I want to give a quick shout out to this YouTube channel for providing amazing footage for abilities. Also, my bud MmPokepedia for helping me with a ton of these rankings. Coming in at 306, I have Wimp Out. This is the signature ability of Wimpod, and forces it to switch when hitting half HP or lower. It's a pretty disruptive ability competitively, and Wimpod doesn't have anything to take advantage of it. At 305, I'm going to put Emergency Exit. This is the same ability as Wimp Out, and is above Wimp Out solely because its user Golisopod can at least find a bit of usefulness with First Impression. This move only works on the first turn out, and is a really strong priority bug type attack, so there is one merit to it, even though without it, Golisopod would be so much better and would be able to use setup and be a bulky sweeper. On to spot 304 is another terrible signature ability in Mimicry. This belongs to Galarian Stunfisk, who belongs in the trash. It changes Stunfisk type depending on the terrain, usually making it just worse, as it will lose its only redeemable trait and its amazing resistances and immunities while also losing its stab. It doesn't have any synergy with the terrains either, unless you want to use Terrain Pulse on that base 66 special attack. Spot 303 is potentially controversial depending on how you look at it. Here I have schooling. My perspective is Wishy-Washy is essentially a Pokemon with no ability, starting in a decently powerful, yet competitively unviable form. And then it has the negative of being completely useless when going under 25% of its max HP. So this fits into the negative abilities for me. In spot 302, I'm going to put Mixeli Might. This signature ability of the Toedscruel line was put in place as a balancing mechanic, perhaps disguised as a beneficial ability. It ignores abilities when using status moves, but forces a user's status moves to go last within its priority bracket. This was likely to not give a mon with 100 base speed the ability to spam Spore. It can be used to ignore some abilities, but these situations rarely come up, and it is almost always going to be negative. Moving on to our shortest segment, abilities that really just have no effect in battle. At spot 301 is the marketing ability, Terra Shift. This ability on paper says it turns Terrapagos into its terrestrial form. This in turn brings its base stats up considerably. But this ability is really just a nothing burger to give Pokemon another marketable plushie. You can't ever battle in the normal form, this ability can't be suppressed, copied, or replaced, and as soon as the transformation occurs, Terrapagos gains a new ability. So this form and ability really have no reason to exist other than marketing. At spot 300, I'm going to place Ball Fetch, at 299, Honey Gather, and 298, Runaway. These three abilities have no effects competitively, even though I advocate for Runaway to allow switching even if trapped, but they're still better to have than those really trash abilities and also have out of battle effects that puts them ahead of Terra Shift. Having these would be an upgrade over the previous abilities. Above those impressive abilities, crossing past the top 300, we see mostly useless and potentially negative abilities. In spot 297, we have Tangled Feet. This is an interesting ability, but also is never seen. It increases your evasion, if confused. So sure, you have a chance to dodge an attack, but you also have to stay in and have a chance to hit yourself. It's just not very practical or even that good. I guess you could run Thrash to self-proc confusion. Buff it to give an immunity to hitting yourself in confusion, and bring back Berserk Gene into infinite confusion, and this ability shoots up 30 to 40 spots easily. Spot 296 will blend in as another never seen ability in Color Change. This is a signature ability of Kecleon. It changes the user's type to match the last move it was hit by. This could be situationally useful to counter types that resist themselves, but can also be played to your opponent's advantage to turn you into their desired typing. And you're probably going to use your stab one hit too. Just use Protean on the Kek. Spot 295 goes to Steadfast. It's kind of in the nothing ability department. It raises the user's speed if flinched. The idea being you might be faster the next turn to not get flinched. It is better than the negative abilities for sure, but have you actually ever seen this in action? It's this low because it really just sees no play, despite having a good idea around it. Moving up to 294 is Normalize. This is the Delcatty line's signature ability. It turns all moves into the normal type and gives them a 20% power boost. This can at least be pretty useful, as you do give up any and all coverage, but you do power up your stab even more, and can do things like hit ground types with Thunder Wave, I guess. Delcatty is pretty trash, but mostly due to its stats. Normalize at least boosts its Fake Out and Double Edge to almost alright damage, I guess. Slightly above Normalize in spot 293 is Grass Pelt. Grass Pelt is another signature ability that is underwhelming. This belongs to the Go-Goat line, and is completely inferior to its other ability, Sap Sipper. This ability increases defense 1.5 times if grassy terrain is active. That's all. There's really no point to ever use this. It also doesn't help Go-Goat isn't good in any competitive format, so the one user isn't popular. Next I will cover two abilities in one. In spots 292 and spot 291, I have Minus and Plus. Plus has slightly better users, I feel, but these are both trash doubles based abilities. They increase the user's special attack 1.5 times if paired with another Pokemon with Plus or Minus. There are also certain moves that only work with this ability, but they are all not worth making team building decisions over. Pretty crap gimmicky abilities, all things considered. I don't think anyone is going to argue them any higher. Spot 290 Shuttered. Anticipation is an underwhelming ability always overshadowed by better abilities on the users. The user shudders on switching if the foe has a super effective or OHKO move. I mean, it could be good information in some niche scouting scenarios, but why ever run this over another actually useful ability? It sits down here for being one of the most meh abilities. Spot 289 definitely saw this placement coming. The ability Forewarn is kind of like Anticipation, but a tad more useful. It works upon switching, but always does something. Forewarn notifies you of a move the opponent has, particularly their highest base power move. Doesn't matter if it is super effective or not. Still never seen though, as it has bad users that have more useful abilities. Spot 288 goes to Leaf Guard. Leaf Guard is another booty ability they decided to cripple mons like Zarude with. It prevents status if harsh sunlight is active. It doesn't even cure status in the sun, which would actually make it really useful, similar to hydration. But it could be useful, so it is at least higher than some of the previous abilities. Spot 287 sees Light Metal. Light Metal halves the user's weight. This can potentially lower the damage of the moves Low Kick and Grass Knot, while potentially increasing the damage taken by Heavy Slam and Heat Crash. Limited applications, since its users have better abilities and their effects rarely come into play. In spot 286, we have the popular ability Pickup. Pickup is more known for its in-game effect, but it is able to pick up consumable one-use items from other Pokemon when used. Unfortunately, this doesn't work with Knockoff, which severely limits its use potential. It is a pretty gimmicky ability with more potential in doubles, but not on the best roster of Pokemon. Spot 285 sees Flower Veil. Previously the signature ability of the Florges line, it prevents allied grass types from having their stats lowered by other Pokemon. So it is doubles exclusive and has an effect that only works on one typing, which is just blocking stat drops. It can be okay if you're running Florges with a Rillaboom to block Intimidates and speed drops, but only would see play because Florges has crap abilities all around. An almost cool ability finds itself at 284 with Aura Break. Aura Break is a mostly useless ability seen on the Zygarde line. It has very limited applications, as it reverses the effects of Fairy Aura and Dark Aura, two actual good abilities we'll see much later. So you have to be going up against Yveltal or Xerneas for this ability to have any effect, or else you essentially don't have an ability. Next. Spot 283 is Rivalry. Rivalry is a double-edged ability. It can either boost the power of your moves if targeting a mon of the same gender, or lower the power of your moves if targeting a mon of the opposite gender. This unreliability turns a potentially strong ability into one that is almost never seen competitively. It has no effect on a genderless foe either. This is too situational to be ranked any higher, I feel. Spot 282 goes to Curious Medicine. Curious Medicine provides the haze effect for your side of the field upon entry. It can be useful for clearing stat drops for your teammate in doubles, but that's about it. The lone user in Galarian Slowking is also more of a singles mon, and this ability won't help at all in singles. So just an underwhelming and never seen ability that might have been decent on a different user. That does it for my pretty useless tier. Next is a not useless tier, which will see abilities with generally positive effects, but mostly very situational or nothing that great. In spot 281 is Magma Armor. Magma Armor is the least useful out of the status immunity abilities. It prevents the user from being frozen, which is definitely the worst status to take, but also the only one that doesn't have any moves that specifically inflict it. It is also only available on Fire-type Pokemon, who usually don't have to worry as much about taking ice moves, so this ability would rarely come into play or be worth using over other abilities. In spot 280 and spot 279, we see identical competitive abilities in Illuminate and Keen Eye. These abilities now have the same effect as of the most current generation. They prevent the user's accuracy from being lowered while also ignoring the target's evasion boosts. This rarely would come into play in singles, as evasion moves are banned and accuracy lowering moves are very rarely seen competitively. In doubles, this theoretically could be used against a minimize strategy to ignore those boosts, but it is very situational, and most viable mons that can use these abilities are more dependent on their way better abilities to be good. Just ahead in spot 278, we see Damp. Damp is a must-have when shiny hunting exploding mons, but definitely not a must-have competitively. It prevents self-destruction moves from being used. This specifically includes blocking Explosion, Self-Destruct, Mind Blown, and Misty Explosion. It prevents the ability Aftermath from doing damage as well. Very, very situationally competitively. It might have been better in earlier gens when exploding was more meta, but it is a lot more rare in recent generations, making Damn very underwhelming. In spot 277, we are flexing our big pecs. This bird-based ability prevents other Pokemon from lowering the user's defense stat. You can't get your D dropped from moves like Fire Lash and Crunch, or status moves like Leer. So it does have beneficial use. It just doesn't really come into play. A lot of these birds are frail or have better abilities to use. 276 is a new ability in Wind Power. Unlike Wind Rider, Wind Power does not give immunity to wind moves. When hit by them, it gives the user the charged effect, boosting the power of the next electric type move they use. This can be procced by Tailwind as well to get off a really strong hit. The problem is the Kilowattrel line is nowhere near bulky enough to make this ability work, and even if it was, it is pretty situational and the payoff isn't amazing. It definitely wants either Volt Absorb or competitive as abilities over this. 275 sees another meh support ability in Healer. Healer works in double battles and has a 30% chance to cure an ally status condition at the end of each turn, before any residual damage from the status is applied. It can be a decent ability for Blissey and Chansey in doubles, and is notably the ability that crippled Mega Adino with. It can be good, but also another underwhelming ability. In spot 274, I have Klutz. While you may see this as a negative ability, it does have some practical applications. Klutz prevents the user from gaining the effects of held items, but they can still hold them. This lets you use moves like Trick and Switcheroo to cripple other Pokemon with choice items, Assault Vests, Status Orbs, Sticky Barbs, Lagging Tails, whatever you want. You don't have to predict perfectly like you would when normally tricking a choice item, as you can switch up moves anytime. It's not great and definitely gimmicky, but you can choose to run Klutz just for these reasons. Spot 273 is Screen Cleaner. I've never really seen this used competitively since the users are less than ideal competitively, but being able to remove the effects of Light Screen, Reflect, and Aurora Veil upon switching could definitely be useful. This is obviously matchup dependent, but I can't really put it any higher than here. One of the OG abilities finds its way to spot 272 in Early Bird. This ability halves the duration of sleep. More useful in earlier gens when sleep could last more than 3 turns. Still, this can let you wake up immediately when put to sleep, and if you use rest, you can wake up after just 1 turn. It's an alright ability, just usually outclassed, and not on the strongest roster of mons. Onto 271, we have Ice Body. This ability heals the user in Hail by 1/16 of their max HP. This is the same rate as Leftovers, and will activate at the end of each turn as long as Hail or Snow is active. Without permanent weather, it might be hard to get much use out of it, but chip healing is always nice. This is another one not usually seen, as it is outclassed on the mons who get it. 270 brings us to Water Compaction. This ability had potential to be great, as it raises the user's defense by 2 stages if hit by a water type move. The problem is, the lone line who gets it, Palossand, is weak to water, and this ability does not grant an immunity.
Nope.
Why would they do this? It could have been up there with Well-Baked Body, and Palossand legit would have a niche somewhere. Ability 269 is Frisk. I actually didn't plan for Frisk to be in one of the 69 spots. That's just how the rankings ended up. Frisk identifies the held items of all opposing Pokemon upon entry. It's not an amazing ability, but getting that kind of information, especially in singles, can be massive. You can scout sets pretty well. Are they Scarfed? Life Orb? Z-Move if you're playing Gen 7? Focus Sash? It can tell you a lot and be handy. Above Frisk in spot 268 is Symbiosis. This doubles ability allows the user to pass their held item to an ally if the ally has consumed their item. This can lead to some cool combos, as you can go all in with one Pokemon who powers up with a consumable item and gets another item to abuse. This could be passing a Scarf to a Belly Drum ally who ate a Citrus Berry, or passing a boosting item to a Power Herb user. Lots of cool combos. Distribution is very limited though, so it isn't seen too often. Last for this tier, in spot 267, is Merciless. I actually like the concept of this ability a lot, as every move against a poison target will result in a critical hit. This is unfortunately exclusive to the Toxapex line. While they have great ways to poison a foe, these offenses, even with critical hits, aren't doing much. I could see this being way higher if a more offensive mon had access, but we never really seen what this ability could do, so I can't really rank it much higher. Next is the OK tier. These abilities are generally pretty alright and have their uses here and there, and I just want to give another big shout out to my buddy Magnus for helping me with this list. 310 is a big number, almost too big for me to comprehend, so it was nice to get another perspective and opinion on these rankings. And if you don't like where an ability is placed, it was probably his fault. So yeah, let's get back into it. In spot 266, we are dripping in the super sweet syrup. This signature ability of the Hydrapple line lowers all opponents' evasion by 1 stage upon entry. While this is really solid as you can fire off lower accuracy attacks without fear of missing, you only get this benefit once. This ability only activates the first time the user is swapped in, so the opponent can just swap out to get rid of the stat drop and your ability is done for the game. It would be a lot higher if it activated anytime, like our next ability in spot 265, Intimidate. Nah, I'm kidding. We have a long ways to go before I open up that box. Spot 265 is Rain Dish. Same properties as Ice Body, healing 1/16 max HP at the end of the turn, but this works in Rain. Rain is a much more viable weather, and this chip healing can really be nice combined with lefties. In doubles, a Rain Dish user paired with a Rain Setter can passively heal around 25% pretty easy with lefties and Protect. Still usually overshadowed by other weather abilities though. Moving on to spot 264, I have another weather ability in Sandvale. This is a controversial one, as it's been banned in singles due to evasion clause. It raises a user's evasion in Sandstorm, giving moves used against it 4/5 of their original accuracy. It also gives an immunity to Sandstorm chip damage. It isn't really seen in doubles, but it did at one point make mons like Cacturne usable, and ended up getting this and other evasion abilities axed. I have to give credit where it's due, as it could be a really frustrating ability to play against. The same goes for spot 263, where Snow Cloak lands. This ability goes ahead of Sandville, mostly thanks to some competitive success recently. Snow Cloak gives the same evasion boost, but in hail or snow. It has had users like Articuno, Glaceon, and Frostlass play. This is easily paired with Alolan Ninetales activate, and often you would throw in a Bright Powder to boost your chances of dodging attacks even further. Kimiki, sure, but it seems to have at least had a little bit of competitive impact. In spot 262 and spot 261, I have Receiver and Power of Alchemy. These two abilities have the same effect of gaining a fallen ally's ability. So you can essentially pass any ability except a select few onto your Passimian or Alolan Muck. I've seen things like Huge Power Passimian or Levitate Muck with minimized strategies on top of it. The bulk of Alolan Muck has me putting it slightly ahead, since it can tank more hits while waiting for its ally to go down to take advantage of its new ability. In spot 260, we are getting the Suction with Suction Cups. This is a decent ability seen on a few lines that prevents the user from being forced out from phasing moves and attacks. It even prevents the item Red Card from forcing a swap. It can be used to set up without being phased, or putting an end to Hazard Sack teams that spam phasing moves. Spot 259 is a fun one in Forecast. This is Castform's signature ability that changes its form based on the weather. Castform is a pretty terrible Pokemon, don't get me wrong, but it is a lot more useful when it can use its different forms to take advantage of the weather. You know, except Sandstorm. But this ability gives it stab on Weather Ball in rain, sun, and snow, while also gaining stab on other moves of those types when transformed. This next ability stinks. Spot 258 is home to Stench. Stench is essentially King's Rock the ability. It gives you a 10% chance to flinch the target when using a damaging move. This is pretty solid and also works with multi-strike moves to give you higher flinch odds. Unfortunately, you have to move first to flinch, and most of the users are pretty slow. They mostly prefer their other better abilities too, which limits how much you would see this ability competitively. But nonetheless, it is still a solid effect that might have shot a little higher if distributed to mons who could abuse it more. Spot 257 goes to Anger Point. This is the definition of an all or nothing ability. Boom or doom. If the user gets crit, they get their attack stat max to +6. In singles, this is very hard to pull off unless you can time your Crocodile switching in against a Wicked Blow or Tauros on a Surging Strikes, but doubles lets you self-proc it with moves like Frost Breath that always crit for an easy setup. This is usually telegraphed on Team Preview, but it can still be a very effective ability if set up properly. Spot 256 sees Hypercutter, a pretty straightforward ability. Bro is proud of his big, meaty claws, and you can't take that from him. You can't lower the attack stat of a Hypercutter user for status, abilities, or damaging moves. It was actually pretty solid on Pokemon like Pinsir and Mawile, who like to use it before Mega Evolving, as it would prevent an incoming Intimidate before being able to Mega and let them attack at full strength. Other than that, it has been outclassed by other abilities on these users, and unfortunately is very rarely seen. Hope you weren't planning on eating berries, and Spot 255 is Unnerve. This ability prevents opposing Pokemon from consuming their own held berries. This arguably could be a bit lower now that I think of it, but preventing the use of berries can be pretty useful. It shuts down Harvest users that keep spamming berries. You can stop a Chesto Resto combo, prevent a berry from proccing on Burden, prevent damaging reducing berries from activating, or a Custide berry from proccing. Lots of useful scenarios. This isn't seen as a great ability, mostly because berries aren't always used on a competitive team, and their users oftentimes just have other great abilities they will choose instead. Spot 254 is Limber. It prevents paralysis. Nice. Getting paralyzed sucks, so it's definitely useful. Do you see it too much? Not really. The competitively viable mons with it have other better abilities, and it won't announce itself otherwise unless it's a move like Thunder Wave, which will fail as its only objective is to paralyze. If you drop a like and subscribe to the channel, I will be on Cloud 9. That's also spot number 253 on this list. Cloud 9 turns off weather effects while the user is active. The weather is still there and will run its course, just none of the effects will happen. This can be a cool ability, most notably on Golduck, being able to spank Primal Groudon with a water type move. For other Pokemon, they can essentially negate a weather team's strengths as long as they are active, which can reduce damage, turn off beneficial abilities, and make weather-based moves less effective. 252 are the amount of EVs you want to invest in one stat. Any more, and you'll be like the ability in this spot, Gluttony. Gluttony is an ability that allows the user to consume pinch berries starting at 50% HP or lower, instead of 25% or lower. This ability definitely peaked in Gen 7, when the pinch HP restoring berries were buffed to restore half the target's max HP. Pokemon like Snorlax and Linoone could belly drum and munch on a pinch berry early to get back to full. You could eat a Salac or Custide berry earlier as well. The HP restoring berries were nerfed in Gen 8, partially thanks to Gluttony, but they still restore 1/3 compared to Citrus berries 1/4, making it still beneficial to use this combo. You ready to mosh, buds? In spot 251, we see Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal doubles a user's weight. This essentially can just power up the moves Heavy Slam and Heat Crash. These two moves compare the user's weight to the target's, and the base power increases the heavier the user is. So Heavy Metal, seen exclusively on Steel types, can be used to oftentimes make Heavy Slam 120 base power, which is a good upgrade over Iron Head's 80 base power. The downside is you may take more damage from moves like Low Kick and Grass Knot, which aren't too common, but definitely not invisible competitively. Okay, top 250. We're moving through this pretty well. Pickpocket is next, and it's a cool ability seen mostly on Dark and Fairy Mons. When hit by a contact move, the user will steal the foe's item. Obviously this means you can't already be holding an item, so users of this ability will often use consumable items. You can see this on Air Balloon, Tinkaton, and Tinkatink as the best users of this ability, who steal and cripple other mons by taking their item while having the ground immunity until they're hit. Spot 249 is a pretty fire one. This goes to Flare Boost, the signature ability of the Drifblim line. This ability boosts the user's special attack by 50% when burned. This is a pretty solid boost and can be paired with a Flame Orb for reliable activation. It also will block other status from affecting you, which is nice. It's just a shame this ability has such a little distribution, as it could be a lot better and more represented. Drifblim itself usually likes the much better and Burden to boost its speed. Ta-da! In spot 248, we reveal Magician. This ability is kind of like a better version of Pickpocket. The user will steal the target's held item all the same, but Magician activates when the user hits the target rather than needing to take a hit. This is a lot more in your control, and you can strategize with this ability a bit better to steal items. Going to 247 is another doubles exclusive ability named Telepathy. This ability allows the user to avoid damaging moves used by its allies. So a Pokemon with this ability won't be affected by your ally's Earthquake, Surf, Discharge, Boom Burst, all moves that will normally hit everyone on the field. It allows more moveset flexibility as you don't have to worry about harming your precious ally. Fun fact, this is the most common ability to have as a hidden ability. Out of the 27 Pokemon who have Telepathy, only the Behemoth line doesn't have it as a hidden ability. Are you ready, kids? The next ability at 246 is Soundproof. This ability grants an immunity to all sound-based moves. There are a good amount of these like Hyper Voice, Boom Burst, Torch Song, Roar, and Psychic Noise to name a few. It has some solid use on mons like Kommo-o, but otherwise is usually outshined by better abilities. 'Tis the story of most of the abilities in this tier. Spot 245 is Immunity. An ability that prevents you from being poisoned is pretty solid. It's distributed to only 3 Pokemon, all of different evolutionary lines, but you probably see it most on Gligar. Poison is a little more common with all the toxic spammers over the gens, and toxic spikes being a thing via Immunity is definitely a serviceable ability. In spot 244, another poison related ability appears in Poison Point. Contact with a Pokemon who has Poison Point brings a 30% chance to poison. This is nice to switch in on a resisted hit and fish for a poison. It isn't really common competitively, as we see some pretty cracked abilities on Poison Point Pokemon, but it still is solid as poison can rack up good passive damage, and this ability can be useful even if sacking the user off. Spot 243 and spot 242 are the same guy. Here we have Vital Spirit and Insomnia. These abilities prevent the users from falling asleep. This gives them nice immunities to moves like Spore, Sleep Powder, Yawn, and any other methods of sleep. It can be useful in metas with prominent Spore users, as you can shut down their main support option. This also blocks the user from using Rest, which is fine because you know what you're getting into when using these abilities. Insomnia I feel sees a bit more use, but neither of these are really prominent competitively. This next ability in 241 has been recently buffed. This is Rattled, an ability that raises the user's speed by 1 stage if hit by a Ghost, Dark, or Bug type attack. Since Gen 8, Rattled also activates if the user is intimidated. This gives the ability a lot more of a chance to activate, as Intimidated is very popular, let's say, in doubles, and not uncommon in singles. The speed boost is nice to grab off a U-turn or knockoff, which are very common moves. You can also self-proc it in doubles with Beat Up to give yourself enough speed boost to outspeed any opposition. Spot 240 goes to ability Q-Charm. Q-Charm is one of the few ways to inflict an infatuation status. Upon contact, there is a 30% chance the attacking mon falls in love, assuming it's opposite gender, since apparently every Pokemon is straight. It can be pretty useful as infatuation gives a 50% chance for the opponent not to move, so you will usually force a switch at very least. Way up in spot 239, Pastel Veil shines. It is a solid 5 spots ahead of Immunity, despite having the same effect in singles of preventing the user from being poisoned. This is because it has the additional effect of protecting allies from being poisoned, which definitely just makes it a better ability. It's only on the Galarian Rapidash line though, which isn't known for its competitive usage, so this is an apt place for Pastel Veil. Spot 238 sees another status immunity ability in Water Veil. Water Veil prevents the user from being burned. This gives you immunity to the popular Will-O-Wisp, avoiding Scald Burns, and burns from those pesky fire type moves you would want to switch in on as a water type. It mostly helps mons like Floatzel and Huntail on non-rain teams, but otherwise is outshined by other abilities Water Veil users have access to. Ability 237 is the new ability Cudchew. It's an ability with solid potential, but will stay in the 200s due to not being on the best users. Farigiraf and the Tauros variations can use this ability to eat a berry and then eat it again at the end of the next turn. This can allow you to get multiple citrus berries or pinch berry heals regardless of your HP after the first heal. It can let you get an extra stat boost from those berries, but unfortunately it doesn't have synergy with many other berries that wouldn't be useful to activate at the end of a turn. On to spot 236 is another signature ability, this time being Tangling Hair. This signature ability of the beautiful Alolan Dugtrio lowers the speed of any Pokemon who make contact with Dougie. Dugtrio isn't a bulky Pokemon by any means, but with its great amount of resistances, it could swap in on a lot of attacks to get the speed drop and outspeed really fast or scarf Mons with its great 110 speed stat. It's nowhere near Arena Trap, but I guess it's good to have an ability that works outside of sand. Speaking of sand, in spot 235 I have Sand Force. Sand Force boosts the power of rock, ground, and steel type attacks by 30% during a sandstorm, while also giving an immunity to sandstorm damage. It might not be this high if it wasn't forced onto Mega Steelix and Garchomp, giving it a couple users who can take advantage of it on sand teams. It's often passed over, as most Pokemon with Sand Force could either set up sand themselves or just have other way better abilities they have to run. This can be a pretty solid ability as it boosts at least one stab from every user not named Shellos. 234 is a deja vu moment as we have Gooey here. This was exclusive to the Goomy lines until the Wugtrio line also received it. It has the same effect of lowering an attacking mon's speed by one stage if they have made contact. The Goodras are all around a lot bulkier and appreciate speed drops more, so it would be a more effective ability on them, hence the slightly higher ranking. It is also the best ability to have on Wugtrio, who isn't bulky at all, but at least has a solid defensive typing and can get off an important speed drop even on a sack on a switch-in. In spot 233, I'm going to put Sticky Hold. This ability pretty much prevents your held item from being messed with. You can't have it knocked off, gassed, tricked, thiefed, pickpocketed, stolen with Magician, eaten with Bug Bite, Pluck, or destroyed with Incinerate. It probably wouldn't be quite this high, but I have a new appreciation for it thanks to Dipplin. It is a great user as it relies heavily on its Eviolite bulk, and not being able to knock it off or trick it away is huge for the Dipper. Mons like Swalot and Aselgor can also take advantage of it, but they have other competing abilities they might prefer. On to spot 232 is Co-Star. I won't lie, I haven't really seen this ability much, but it looks like it could be pretty solid. It is a doubles ability exclusive to Flamigo that copies an ally's stat changes from themselves on switch-in. So it's like using Psych Up on switch-in, but it can also copy negative stat changes. So it should be mostly beneficial as you would use it next to a setup mon for free stats, but it also has the chance of copying the drops from Intimidate, Icy Wind, and other stat lowering moves. Okay, spot 231 is Justified. It raises the user's attack by one stage if hit by a dark type attack. It's a pretty solid ability on the physically attacking Swords of Justice users and can be solid on Lucario and Absol. They all resist dark, so it makes sense to switch them in for the attack boost. Obviously you have to be hit with specifically a dark type move, so it is very situational, but a lot of teams in singles run at least one knockoff user, so you have a solid chance of being able to activate it. Spots 230 and 229 are another pair of identical abilities. These are Stalwart and Propeller Tail. These doubles abilities ignore redirection effects, so Follow Me, Rage Powder, and Ally Switch, along with abilities like Storm Drain and Lightning Rod. You will always hit the slot you want to target without worrying about your moves being messed with by these little buggers. I have Propeller Tail a little higher as Barraskewda's stab is directly countered by Storm Drain, so it is very helpful for that. It can help the Duraludon line not having its Thunderbolts absorbed or Draco's redirected into fairies, and is the only ability worth using on Duraludon. Spot 228 goes to Swarm. This is an ability that activates when the user is at 1/3 of its max HP or lower. It will power up the user's bug type attacks by 50% when in range. This can be a solid boost on strong attackers like Non-Hustle Durant, Substitute Heracross and Volcarona, Sashly Vanny, and the mighty Kricketune. It's another often passed over ability on most users as its requirements take a specific setup, but it can be self-proc by using moves like Substitute to get in range and activating a pinch berry to get off really strong stab bug attacks. In spot 227, the form changing ability Flower Gift shows up. This ability activates during harsh sunlight and boosts the attack and special defense of the user and allies by 1.5 times. And since Gen 5, it's responsible for changing Cherrim to its Sunshine form. This would likely be a lot higher if it was on a mon with greater competitive impact, as it's not optimal to run a Cherrim, but the attack and Spadef boost in Sun could be useful when paired with strong allies to take advantage of. Spot 226 is an underrated ability in Wonder Skin. It lowers the accuracy of status moves used against a user to 50%, so your 100% accurate Spore, 50%. Your 90% accurate Thunderwave, 50%. It really has more potential than it is shown, but when you look at the mons who receive it, other than Delcatty, they all have better abilities that synergize better. I would like to see a bulky doubles oriented mon get this ability and shine with it. Spot 225 belongs to Own Tempo. This ability prevents confusion and even protects against self-proc moves like Outrage and Thrash, or eating items like the Mango Berry. It was a pretty bland ability, but Generation 8 gave it a buff to be unaffected by Intimidate. This actually gives it some use, as confusion isn't super common to see. The Licky Licky line and Avalugg use this to avoid Intimidate attack drops, while Lilligant can spam Petal Dance without confusing itself afterwards. In spot 224, I have Quick Feet. This ability is similar to Guts, one we'll see way higher. It increases the user's speed 1.5 times when status. It could be useful on Pokemon like Jolteon with a Flame Orb to outspeed Scarf users while not being locked into a move itself. Ursaring would use it in lower tiers as an option to patch up its low speed while still getting a really strong boosted facade off. It sadly isn't optimal on any other Pokemon as they don't have the same synergy or just have better abilities. In spot 223, Perish Body shows itself. This is a signature ability of Cursula. When hit by a contact move, the attacker and user will have a Perish count of 3 turns set. This works like Perish Song, as both Pokemon will faint unless swapped out. With Cursula's pitiful physical bulk, you can't really threaten this ability too many times in a match, unless you're healing with Strength Sap, but this ability is still pretty good insurance to have that can stop a physical attacker from sweeping by forcing it to eventually swap out. The user itself just is very underwhelming. It would probably be a better option to have on its bulkier pre-evolution. 222, you know what to do. Surge Surfer slides into this spot, being exclusive to a Alolan Raichu. It doubles the user's speed stat in electric terrain. It has good synergy, as the terrain boosts Raichu's electric attacks as well, so you'd be able to run damage boosting items rather than Scarf, and usually can just go Modest for the extra damage. It gave Alolan Raichu a brief stint of success with Tapu Koko's electric surge allowing some electric spam. 221 is the ability Sniper. Sniper increases the power of critical hits. This turns the 1.5 times boost into a much better 2.25 boost for crits. It's most notably seen on Focus Energy Razorclaw Kingdra, who would agility up and spam 100% crit Draco Meteors and Hydro Pumps. It's a good option on Drapion as well, who has nice high crit options along with Fearow, Beedrill, and Inteleon, who can do great damage with its Scope Lens and Snipe Shot sniping combo. Spot 220 sees the ability Solar Power. Solar Power raises the user's special attack 1.5 times in harsh sunlight at the cost of 1/8 of their max HP each turn Sun is still active. This ranking is pretty much carried by Charizard as the best user. It can throw off really strong Fire Blasts and Weather Balls. It is pretty nice in doubles when you can have a Sunsetter help you out. Most other users prefer their other abilities, other than Mega Houndoom, who is stuck with Solar Power, which can be good if you want to use it on a Sun team as a wall breaker, but the recoil of staying in on Sun turns is a big price to pay, as it makes you easier to revenge kill as you try to wall break. In spots 219, 218, and 217, I'm going to group the starter abilities Overgrow, Torrent, and Blaze. I have them in that order, as I feel that's going worst offensive type to best. These abilities have the same pinch effect that Swarm does. Your respective stab is boosted 1.5 times when below 1/3 of your max HP. These get slapped almost exclusively on the starter Pokemon as abilities that are just alright and can help you in a pinch. They sit down this low because they are not the most reliable to get activated, and even if you do, it is usually hard to get those boosted hits more than once. They are fine abilities, but nothing special, and I don't feel fit any sort of niche to rocket them up the list. In spot 216, I have Hustle. This is an ability that does fill a niche, bringing it up this high. It boosts a user's attack stat by 50%, but lowers physical moves accuracy by 20%. It is a high risk, high reward ability, as it gives such a powerful boost, but it could cost you dearly if you miss. It allows Pokemon like Durant, Hisuian Lilligant, Flapple, Dracozolt, and even Delibird to punch above their weight class and deal serious damage. Yeah! It's like having a choice band, but you can switch up your moves. They just might miss. The pros and cons of this ability weigh themselves to the top of the OK tier in my opinion. The last ability in this tier at spot 215 is Sweet Veil. Sweet Veil is to Vital Spirit in Insomnia, as Pastel Veil is to Immunity. It provides the effect of preventing the user from falling asleep, but it protects allies from sleep too. This is pretty good, as Spore is very common in doubles, and sleep is a big problem to face. You can free item slots and other abilities that might be used to counter sleep by bringing a Sweet Veil user. It isn't on the greatest doubles mons, but it's still a solid ability bring nonetheless. That's gonna wrap up part 1 for now, buds. Here are the visual tier lists for the rankings up until the OK tier. I'll have part 2 linked here at the end screen when it releases. Let me know what you think of the rankings so far, and what you think are going to be the top abilities. Make sure to subscribe to be notified when part 2 comes out. If you want to support the channel, check the links in the description. I'll catch y'all soon, buds.